News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. The U.S. and Iran appear to be moving closer to an interim peace agreement meant to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump just reposted Iran Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who said on social media that a memorandum of understanding with the U.S. has, quote, never been closer. Bloomberg's Abir Abu Omar has more on what Iranian media say about the deal.
Iran is saying that the negotiations for a final ceasefire or the final deal are not going to go through until the unblocking of half of the $24 billion in frozen assets goes through. And so President Trump has opposed that in the past. Iran hawks in Washington have opposed that in the past, adding pressure on President Trump. We're also seeing the lifting of the oil sanctions, yet another thing that Washington is opposed to. So this whole deal seems to be playing very much into Iran's favor.
Bloomberg's Abir Abu Omar reports that officials had told Bloomberg News a deal could be signed on the sidelines of the G7 summit in France next week, or as early as this Sunday in Geneva if both sides agree. And Energy Secretary Chris Wright says more oil is flowing out of the Persian Gulf as well as other routes, reducing the negotiating power of Iran and bringing a deal even closer.
They've thought they have this great leverage over the United States of America. Of course, it isn't really leverage over us. It's leverage over the world economy. But they're losing that leverage right now. They are rapidly and will continue to lose that leverage. So you would think that their urgency to do a deal is rising, and it is rising.
Energy Secretary Chris Wright spoke with Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern at the Bloomberg Energy Security Executive Briefing in Houston. Hear more of our interview with Secretary Wright on the Bloomberg Talks podcast. Wall Street traders drove stocks higher as oil fell after Iran signaled that deal with the U.S. may be approaching, fueling hopes for an end to the war. We do check markets for you all day long here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 up about 0.5%, Nasdaq up 0.1%, the Dow up 0.75%, the 10-year Treasury yield at 4.47%, the 2-year yield at 4.07%. WTI crude oil now at $84 a barrel, Brent crude now approaching $87 a barrel. Consumer sentiment is off its record low of 44.8 in May, now at 48.9. That is the first time in 4 months that sentiment rose as lower gasoline prices provided some relief for Americans who are grappling with a surge in inflation. Joanne Shu is director of consumer surveys at the University of Michigan. She tells Bloomberg that this isn't a surprise.
Consumers have been seeing a bit of a downtick in gasoline prices over the last few weeks, and consumers absolutely did notice that. So they're feeling a little bit of relief on that, and it shows up in their assessments of their personal finances.
Survey Director Joanne Shu tells Bloomberg that overall price levels are still very high and consumers still see risk on the horizon. The survey shows consumers expect prices to rise 4.6% over the coming year. A federal judge in Virginia will allow a lawsuit to proceed, challenging the Trump administration's plans for a $1.8 billion fund for alleged victims of political weaponization, despite statements from U.S. officials that the plan will not move forward. During today's hearing, Judge Leonie Brinkema questioned whether the government had really dropped its plans for the fund. She gave the government 1 week to submit a written, sworn statement to prove the fund is indeed dead. Ken Leach, the former co-chief investment officer at Western Asset Management, will plead guilty in a case of so-called cherry picking. He's accused of assigning winning trades to favored clients while forcing others to take losses. A lawyer for the former star bond trader says he will enter a guilty plea at a hearing in New York just days before his criminal trial was set to start. The move allows Leach to seek a more lenient sentence in a case where he faced decades in prison. FTX co-founder Sam Bankman Fried's fraud conviction and 25-year prison sentence have been upheld by a federal appeals court that rejected his claims of not receiving a fair trial. The 3-judge panel declined to overturn the 2023 guilty verdict, which Bankman Fried argued was tainted by improper evidentiary rulings. He can try to appeal to the full appeals court or to the U.S. Supreme Court. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.